Creating these classes requires equipment and services that cost money. If you appreciate this education, please think about going to elithecomputerguy.com and offering a one-time or monthly recurring donation. Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli the Computer Guy, and in today's class I'm going to show you how to copy tables. So essentially you will be able to back up tables so that when you work on a table, if you do something stupid, you will be able to recover the information without actually having to go through and type everything out again. And I'm also going to show you how to back up databases and then be able to restore your full databases. Now these tasks can be very useful for you, again, as you get into more complicated SQL statements, especially when you start modifying tables. One of the big issues that you can run into is if you fat finger something, or if you're not thinking something all the way through, you can go through and you can modify a whole bunch of records in half a nanosecond on a table, and that can be a real problem to go through and try to manually fix. If you create backups of tables and backups of your complete database, if you go through and you do something really stupid, you can just simply delete that table or delete the database, basically restore from the backup that you have, and then go on from there. So what I'm going to be showing you today is how to basically back up your table. So we're going to create a table based off of the schema of a current table that you have, and then we are going to insert all the data from the original table into the new table, and then I'm going to show you how to back up an entire database and then be able to recover that entire database. So this should be some pretty useful tools for you. So, warning, Will Robinson, warning. The warning for today's particular class isn't too severe. There's just a few things that you just do have to keep in mind when you're going to be doing the tasks that I'm going to be showing you how to do. The first is to know what command prompt you should be in. This can cause you a real issue. So when we're going to be copying a table, essentially backing up a table, T-A-B-L-E, we are going to be doing that within the MySQL command line. So we're going to go into MySQL. We are going to create a table based off of the schema of a different table, and then we're going to dump all of the records into the new table. And so that will be done in the MySQL command line. Actually backing up the database and then restoring the database will be done within the Linux command line. So this is one of those places where it can get a little bit confusing and you can know a command, but as always, if you type the command in at the wrong place, it's not going to work properly. So when we copy, basically when we back up a table, that will be within the MySQL command line. When we're dealing with backing up the entire database, that will be within the Linux command line. One of the other things to be thinking about is when we are creating a backup of something such as a table, we will be using _BAK. So we have the parts table. So we have the parts and the vendors table. I'm just going to be using the database that we've been using. And so when I create a backup of the parts table, I will do parts _BAK. So that will indicate that it's the backup for the parts table. It is important to understand with the naming convention within MySQL that the normal naming convention is basically the database period the table. So class DB period parts would be the parts table within the class DB database. So again, when you're not really thinking about the command line, if you try to create a new table within MySQL called like parts.bak, so basically as you would create a backup file within the Linux world, that will cause issues and that will error out. The reason being is because it looks like it's a BAK table within the parts database. So that is just something to keep in mind. If you're going to be backing up tables, basically creating copies of tables, and you want to use the normal BAK naming convention, you do _BAK versus period BAK because of how the naming convention works in MySQL. And then the final thing is not really a warning, Will Robinson, but just more some friendly professional advice. If you're still new to the MySQL world, if you're still fat fingering a lot of things, if you're not really sure where there should be a comma and where there should be a double quotation mark, when there should be a single quotation mark, all of that type of thing, one of the things that I would warn you is at this point that you should still be manually typing everything in. Remember, with dealing with technology, technology is one of those skills, a lot like bricklaying, where you can intellectually understand how to lay bricks. So I grasp the concept of laying bricks. You take a brick, you make some mortar, you slather some mortar on a brick, you put another brick on top, right? Intellectually, I know how to lay bricks. Nobody wants me to actually lay a brick. Because although I know how to put a brick on the ground, how to make some mortar, how to slap some mortar on a brick, and how to put another brick on top of that brick, I grasp that concept, but I don't have the tactile feel for actually laying bricks, right? There's understanding how to do something intellectually, and then there is doing something day in, day out, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for a year that actually gives you the skill to be able to do something. The same is true with creating MySQL statements or scripting or programming languages, any of that type of thing. Where commas go, where semicolons go, where the delimiters go, all of that type of thing, you can intellectually know that without actually being able to do the work, right? Because you know it, but you're not used to typing it out. So typing things out again and again and again and again and again, that's not a waste of time. That's teaching your brain the tactile skill of, okay, this is where a comma goes, and this is where an open parenthesis goes, and this is where a closed parenthesis goes. And so that's where, like with the old timers, you can just sit there and you can just type stuff out. Because they've simply done it, 5,000 times. And so if they put a semicolon somewhere, they put a comma somewhere, not because they know the specific reason even, is just because that's how they've always done it, right? You get that with a lot of new people. They get into the tech field and they're like, why is that a semicolon? Or why is that a parentheses? Explain it to me. And the old timers are just like, it's just how you do it. If I do it this way, it works. If I don't do it that way, it doesn't work. So therefore, I'll do it the way that works, right? And the reason the old timers are like that is just because they have done it 5,000 times. So why I'm saying this is, especially when you're able to do things like create backups of tables or create backups of an entire database, it becomes really easy for a lot of new people to simply create a database once with a set of tables once, with a set of records once, and then simply create backups of what they've created, and every time they screw something up, they simply restore from the backup. One of the issues with this is that it does make it quicker to basically progress down the little learning track, but you're not getting the tactile feel of actually recreating tables, of recreating databases, of recreating records thousands and thousands and thousands of times, so that when you actually go out there to get a job and somebody asks you to write a SQL statement or whatever, that you can just type it out. It is amazing how many people will go through an entire training program and at the end of it basically be worthless because they intellectually grasp what's supposed to happen, but they weren't actually practicing the entire time so that they got used to writing things out. So that'll be the only warning here from a professional standpoint. I am going to be showing you how to back up these tables and back up the databases so that you can restore when you do something stupid. But I would argue with this type of thing, until you are really comfortable making tables, until you are really comfortable inserting records and doing updates and all that kind of thing, don't do these backups yet to restore. If you mess something up when you're completely new, just rebuild that entire database, rebuild all the tables, rebuild all the records, actually type all that stuff in. There really is a value to doing that 1,000 times, because when you've done that 1,000 times, then it just becomes really easy to code everything out. So anyways, with that, let's go over to the computer and I will show you how to make copies of tables, insert all the data from one table into another table, and then I will show you how to back up and then restore your databases. So here we are back at my lab system again. I am running a MacBook Pro. I have VirtualBox installed. Within an instance on VirtualBox, I have Ubuntu Desktop 18.04 LTS. We have the graphical user interface here. So as we progress, we start doing PHP programming. This will actually start to make a little bit more sense for you. But basically, this is what we're using for a lab environment. Again, I did use something called task cell in order to create the full LAMP stack. So with task cell, it installs Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So that's what we're dealing with this lab environment here. So with that, we're going to go down to Show Applications. We go up to the top, we type in Terminal, because we're going to need the terminal, and then we hit Enter, and we get our normal terminal. So at this point, we have created a user account. So we are going to log in to MySQL the standard way. So MySQL space -u, whatever your username is. Bob is our username, space -p to log in. Ask for the password, super secret, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We hit enter, and yay, we are in MySQL. I'm going to hit Control L to clear the screen. And the first thing that we're going to do is just to make sure we know what we're dealing with our environment. We're going to type in show databases, semicolon. This is going to show us the databases that we're dealing with. So for this particular environment, we have the standard default databases here. And then the database that we're going to be worried about is this class DB. So then we're going to go into use class DB. So this is going to actually put us into the class DB database, semicolon, of course, and then we're going to hit enter. From here, we're then going to do show tables, semicolon. So this is going to show us what tables are currently within this database. And so as I said before, again, if you've been following along, these are the exact same tables, the exact same database we've been using. So we have a parts table and we have a vendors table. So at this point, let's say if I want to start mucking around with a parts table. Again, I've started to learn some of these SQL statements. I've started to learn how to update. I want to start updating tables. I want to start updating records in tables, but I would want to make sure I don't do something incredibly stupid. So I'm going to create a copy of the parts table. I'm going to create a backup of the parts table. So I'm going to hit Control L to clear the screen, make it easier to see. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to do create table like we had before. And then a new little argument we're going to be put in here is if not exists. So this can be an important one, especially if you're creating backups. So at this point, if you're making multiple different tables that might have the same name. So normally when you're creating tables, like I create a vendors table, I create a parts table, I create a users table, I'm not worried about creating a table over a table I've already created, basically overwriting a table. But when you start copying tables, when you start creating backups of tables, you want to make sure you don't overwrite something that you have previously created. One of the big problems you can run into is that you create a backup of a table and then you make some modifications to the original table, and then you create another backup, and then that overwrites the backup that you originally had, and then it can turn into a real mess. So basically what this says here is we're going to create a table if the table name that we're giving does not currently exist. So then we're going to do parts, and I'm going to do underscore, again, underscored BAK. So underscore BAK, basically BAK in the Linux world, this just denotes a backup file or a backup configuration. And again, we are using the underscore because if I used a period here, it would fail out because the naming convention is database period table. So if I put parts period BAK, it would appear to be the BAK table within the parts database. And again, that is incorrect and wrong. So we're going to use underscore here. And then what we're going to say is like. So we want to create a table, parts underscore BAK, if a table parts underscore BAK does not currently exist. And we want the schema to look like parts. And then we do semicolon, right? So basically, this is going to recreate the schema for parts in the parts underscore BAK new table. I hit enter, yay, everything went through. So now if I do show tables, as I do before, semicolon, we're going to see parts, and we're going to see parts underscore BAK. So now if we do describe, DESC space parts, semicolon, we can see for the parts database, again, we got the field ID, or we got the part ID, we got the part name, we got the part price, int text float, primary key auto increment, the whole 9 yards. And now if we do describe parts underscore BAK, semicolon, we can say that the schema here is identical. So parts underscore BAK and parts schema is the same. Part ID is a primary key, is an auto increment, is an int, part name is text, so on and so forth. But it is important to understand that all we did here is we copied the schema of the table. At this point, we have not actually copied the data. So if we do select all from parts, so we select all the records from a parts table and we hit enter, we can see cog, rod, sprocket, blah, blah, blah. Whereas if we do select all from parts underscore BAK, semicolon, we can see that is an empty set. So at this point, all we have done is we have copied the schema. So this may be valuable, right? Maybe you want to mess around with different types of data sets using the same schema. So I'm going to create, 20 parts in this table, and then what I want to do is I want to keep the schema of the table. I want to keep the column names. I want to keep the data types. I want to keep the auto increment, but maybe I want to put in different data and play with that. That's one thing you can do here too, is you can simply copy the schema without actually copying the records. Now, in order to copy the records, we're going to hit Control L. Clear everything out again. So at this point, what we do to copy the records is we use the insert command. So insert newTable, so parts underscore BAK. So basically insert into parts underscore BAK. And then we're going to say select from, we're going to select all from parts, the old table. So insert into that new table that we've created, select all from the old table, from parts. Pretty simple there. Then we're going to do semicolon. Then we're going to hit enter. Everything okay. So query okay, 6 rows affected, record 6, duplicate 0, blah, blah, blah. Now if we do select all from parts, we get the results that we would be expecting. And now if we do select all from parts underscore BAK, semicolon. Now we can see that within the parts underscore BAK, we now have the same records. So COG is at 1, it's at $11.50. COG is at 1, it's $11.50. So at this point, we have now been able to copy the table with the schema as it was, and then we're able to copy all of the records into this particular table. This is one thing here. There's always 20 ways to skin a cat in the Linux or the MySQL world. So there are other ways to recreate a table and insert all the records into the new table. What I like about using this whole like command, so this whole create table if not exists, new table like existing table, using that particular syntax, what's good about that is that copies the schema. So there is a way to copy the table without the schema there, without the auto increment, without the primary key, without some of those other configurations, but then you might run into problems in the future. So by using this like command, you're able to copy the schema as is. Primary key, auto increment, foreign keys, a whole bunch of stuff we haven't gone into yet. Basically, you're just able to duplicate that entire table. So that's just something to think about there. So now, finally, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to actually basically back up and then restore a database. So again, if we go here to show databases, we do semicolon just to show what databases we have. Again, we have the class DB, and then we have the default databases that are created. So what we're going to think about is this whole class DB. And at this point, what we're going to do is we are going to exit out of MySQL. So again, as I talked about before with the command line, that when we're backing up tables, when we're copying tables, that will be within the MySQL command line. But in order to back up the database itself, that will be within the Linux command line. So with that, let's hit enter. And so now you can see that we are back at the Linux command line. So I'll tap in clear. And so now, in order to back up a database, we're going to be using a tool called mysqldump. So mysqldump. So this should be installed by default when you install MySQL. Then we have to give the credential information, so space -u, and then whatever your username is, space -p, to ask for the password. And then what we're going to say is what database we want to back up. So we are going to want to back up the class DB, then we're going to do space, and then we are going to do arrow. So this arrow basically is signifying we want class DB to be copied to whatever we put in next. So this is going to be one of those places where you need to know a little bit about Linux. So again, we are no longer in the complete beginner phase of these tech classes. You do have to know a couple of things in order to be doing what I'm talking about now. So the big thing here is that you actually need permission to be able to write a file to wherever you're going to be putting this backup file. So to make life easy, again, having a graphical user interface here, what we can do is we can go on this whole files thing. So we can click on files, and then from here we can click on other location, and then we go to computer. And so this is where we can start to figure out where we can actually dump this SQL backup file. So if you go to the home folder, and then we have the user account Bob, and then here we have desktop. So we're going to put this SQL backup onto the desktop. So hopefully, if everything goes right, it will show up over here. So again, remember this is the Linux world, so you do have to worry about capitalization. So what we're going to do here is going to do space / and then we're going to type in home / Bob / and again, so home and Bob, those were all in lowercase. Then upper D E S K T O P. So now this all here, this depends on your Linux configuration. Don't ask me. Go and take a look. At this point, you should understand a bit about Linux. I have a whole series of Linux classes if you want to go learn that. The main thing that you need here is you need a folder you have permission to write to. So again, basically, we're going to system root. So the home folder, in system root, the Bob folder in the home folder, and then the desktop folder within all of that. Then we're going to do /, and then just to make life easier, we're going to do backup, and we're just going to call this .sql. Because again, now we are in the Linux world, so we can use the Linux naming convention. So I'm just going to call this backup.sql. So I think I know what the hell I'm talking about. And then I'm going to hit enter. It's going to ask for the password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then I'm going to hit enter. And it did not seem to error out. So, oh, there you go. Yay! So we have the backup.sql file right there. So it was created because we did the class db. And that would go to home, Bob, desktop, backup.sql. Just to make sure that I'm not like screwing with you here. If we did backup 2, we hit enter. We do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, now you can see that backup to .sql was created. And so what you're doing is you're using the MySQL dump. Again, that's important, not MySQL. You're using the MySQL dump tool, --u, whatever your username is, --p, and then simply put in what database you want to back up. You do the little arrow, and then you point to a folder that you have the right permission to write to, and then you type in whatever you want that backup to be called. Again, since we are now in the Linux world, you can use the Linux naming conventions. So from that, the next thing that we can do is we can actually create a database simply from here at the Linux command line. So we can do the MySQL, there we go, MySQL, and then we're going to use a tool called mysqladmin. So again, we are at the Linux command line, but we can use mysqladmin, --u, username, --p, and then we can create a database. So we say create a database within the MySQL server. So we're going to do a class db _ BAK. Right? So basically, we're going to create a database within the MySQL database that we already have, and we're basically going to call it the class db _ BAK database. And so this is going to be like a live backup database that we can deal with. So again, right here, this backup file here, so when we backed up the class DB, the class database, this is a simple file. So I can copy, I can paste this, I can move this over the network, I can do a lot of things with this. The one thing I can't do with it is work with it actively. So this right here is simply a backup file. So if I want a backup that it can actually do something with, I'm then going to need to restore that backup file into a new database that we've created within the MySQL database server. So that's what this is going to do. So mysqladmin, so it's a different tool. So mysqldump backs up the database. mysqladmin allows you to run administrative tasks against the MySQL server without actually being logged into it. So we're going to do create, and then we're going to say basically create a database called this, and then we are going to hit enter, asking me for the password. password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now we're going to hit enter, and if nothing errors out, that's that. Now from here, now we have to make sure that we don't fat finger anything. So what we can do is we can do MySQL space -u, what your username is, space -p for the password. And then what we're going to say is we're going to bring the backup file into this new database that we've created. So we're going to say class db underscore BAK. So make sure capitalization counts. So whatever your capitalization is, make sure that you replicate it here so you don't run into any problems. And then we need to do an arrow. Now the arrow goes into the database. So we're saying pull information from somewhere into the database. So here we said from the database, put information here. Now we're saying into this database, pull the information, pull the backup file from somewhere else. And so hopefully, if I don't fat finger this, then we're just going to go to the location, /home, /bob, /d uppercase, DESKTOP, /BACK up.SQL. And then you look at it. Okay, so MySQL, space -u, Bob, user, space -p. It's going to ask me for the password. Into this database that we've created, we want to put all of the information from this backup file. That looks right. Cross your fingers, hit enter, ask for a password. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hit enter, and we get no errors. Yay, no errors. And from here, we can then go into your MySQL database and take a look around. So again, we do MySQL, space -u, Bob, whatever your username is, space -p. So we're going to be logging into MySQL now. Ask for the password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hit enter. Let's do Control L to clear the screen. And so now we can take a look at the databases. So we do show databases, semicolon, because we are now back in the MySQL world. Again, this is why dealing with computers, especially the command line, can be so frustrating, because Linux doesn't want semicolons. MySQL does want semicolons, right? Like that's one of the problems that people run into, is different command lines require different ways to interface with it. And it can get very confusing for people. Anyways, so we hit enter now, and so now we can see we have the class DB as we had before, and now we have the class DB underscore BAK. So this is our new backup. So then we can do use. So we're going to go use the class DB underscore BAK. Did that right? Yep. So now we're going to go into that particular database. Then we're going to do show tables, semicolon. And so look, so we have all those tables that we created before. Those tables are now in the class DB. Then if we do, let's say select all from parts, just like we would in the normal class DB database. We're going to hit enter, and we see we got the cog, the rod, the sprocket, the nut, the washer, the flange. If we do select all from vendors, semicolon, we are going to see Sue Sprocket, Mega Cog, widgets are us, the whole 9 yards. And so this is now in that backup database. So we were able to back up the database, then we were able to create a new database. We were able to dump all the information from the backup into the new database. And now, as you can see, it is an exact replica. And so we can go about with what you're doing. So that's really all there is to backing up tables and then being able to back up and restore your databases. So there you go. You now have some database recovery options. If you create backups of your tables, if you create backups of your databases before you start going in and doing updates, then if you do something stupid, which we all know you're gonna do, you can go back and you can quickly recover the information that is lost and start from square one. So this can be very useful for you, especially when you're trying to figure out the proper statements to write. Remember, when you're dealing with a production environment, the reality is you are going to create SQL statements, and then those SQL statements will be used millions and millions and millions and millions of times, right? So you'll sit down and you'll initially develop the SQL statements, and they should They should be so perfect, so good, that you really never have to go back and edit them. But to make sure that they do what they're supposed to do, what you can do is you can create a copy of the database that you're going to be working with, and then with that copy, you run your SQL statements again and again and again, and verify that there's no issues, and verify that there's no problems, and verify there's no data loss, and verify there's no wonkiness or whatever. And then when you finish with that, then you can take those statements and then you can actually put those into the production environment. But the way you're able to write statements that will last for millions or possibly billions of cycles is by initially writing those statements against a copy of a database, a copy of the tables, verifying that everything works how it's supposed to work, and then go from there. So it's all pretty simple. One of the big things, though, again, with that whole create table, is there is that argument, if not exists. That's an important one to be putting in there, especially when you're doing things like backing up tables. Now, initially, theoretically, to be clear here, I probably didn't teach you right. It's going to be a shot. It's going to be a shot. I probably did not teach you properly. You probably should not be, or you probably should be using the if not exists whenever you create a table. But for me, when I'm building out like a database, when I'm building out tables, especially for labs, the names of things are pretty different, right? You have the users table, and you have the vendors table, and you have the parts table, and you have the accounts table, and you have the invoice table. So I'm not really worried about overwriting a table that I've previously created, just because I know my naming convention is such that everything is relatively different. But something to be thinking about is you're doing things like creating backup files, right? You may want to create multiples of a backup file, right? So basically like iterative. So you're working with a table, and so you create the first backup of the table, and then you go through and you run some updates. And then you get like some new results. You're like, ooh, those are interesting results. Let me back up this too. So I want the original backup, but I want this iterative change, right? In case I want to go back and work on this specific one. And so if you do the if not exists, it makes sure you don't accidentally overwrite, right? So if you do like backup 1, backup 2, backup 3, backup 4, and then you're just being stupid and you forget that you already did backup 4, basically, so you don't overwrite backup 4, that can be very valuable with the if not exists. Again, with duplicating tables or copying tables, there are other ways to copy a table within the MySQL world. The reason why I like using the like command in order to recreate a table is because it copies everything from the schema. So the auto increment, the primary keys, things called foreign keys. Basically, there's some other configurations you can put in a schema we haven't dealt with yet. And so when you do the like command, you're doing a Xerox copy of the schema of one table and copying it to the next table. There are ways to copy a table where it's not quite a Xerox copy. It's more like a ditto copy. Kind of sort of the same, but not exactly. And that may be useful for certain circumstances. It is useful for certain circumstances. But again, when I am teaching you these types of things, I try to focus on probably the best way for you to initially learn. And then if you want to learn other ways, again, we may do classes in the future, or you can do some research on it. But I like using that like thing. Then past that, do remember, so when you're copying or backing up tables, that is all done within the MySQL command line. But then when you go to actually back up a database, that will be done from the Linux command line. Again, very important things to think about with things like naming conventions. So when you're creating a backup file within MySQL itself, you do _BAK or whatever your naming convention is. You don't do period, because remember, in the MySQL world, it's database period table. So if you try to create a backup file called table.back, it's going to run into all kinds of nasty issues. Whereas if you're in the Linux world, having a period.back is considered a normal naming convention. So you could have a SQL or a database.back, and that would make sense. So those are some things to keep in mind. But then when you get to actually backing up a MySQL database, again, you go to the Linux command line, and then within the Linux command line, you use the mysqldump command. So mysql dump --u, your username, --p to request a password. Then you give whatever database it is that you're going to be backing up from your database server. Then you do an arrow. And the important thing past this is then you need to give a location that you actually have write permission to. What that location is, I don't know. I'm not dealing with your server. You just need to have that permission. So again, this is where we start getting into the world of, in the technology world, it's not about knowing only one product. You need to understand MySQL, and in order to really administer in MySQL, you also need to understand Linux or whatever operating system that you're dealing with. So for me, I dumped it onto the desktop just to make it easy so you could actually see it. Again, in the Linux world, capitalization matters. So as you saw, it was /home, all under lowercase, /Bob, username, all lowercase, /uppercase D, lowercase, the rest desktop, right? Because that's the actual name. Lowercase, all lowercase desktop is different than uppercase D, the rest lowercase desktop, right? And then /, and then whatever you want the name of that backup file to be. You know, whatever, backup.sql, whatever else, and that will dump the backup file to wherever you have that permission to write. Now, the cool thing about that is that is now a portable file. So that is a portable file, just like an image file is portable, just like a movie file is portable, just like a text file is portable. When you have that backup file, you can now put that onto a flash drive and take it home and then import it onto your database server at home. You can use that as a backup. So you could, if you have some kind of production environment and you do the backup, you could put that onto a flash drive, and then you could take that to be an offsite backup. So that is a full replica of the database that you have backed up, and it is completely portable. Now again, to be clear here, be careful, because from a security standpoint, that's your database. That's it. If a hacker or if somebody gets their hands on that portable version, that portable backup of your database, they can walk away with it, and then trouble can ensue. But the nice part about that is it is completely portable. So again, especially for these lab environments, you could be doing something at school, you could be doing something at work, you want to go home, keep playing with it, simply do a backup, copy it to the flash drive, go home, and then basically import it into your MySQL server at home and keep doing what you're doing. So those are things to keep in mind. Past that, we then stayed within the Linux shell. We used mysqladmin tool. So before we use a mysqldump tool, so that's for the backup. Then we use a mysqladmin tool. Mysqladmin tool gives you some functionality. So basically you can interact with the MySQL database server from the Linux command line for different things that can be useful. So one of the things that we did is we simply created a database. So we created a new database. And so this is a live database. Again, the important thing to understand, when we backed up the database before, that turns into a portable file, but it is not live. You can't actually access it until you recover the data somewhere. So what we did is we created a live database within the database server, the class DB _BAK. So that is now a live database. And then we used the MySQL command, but not while we were logged into MySQL. So we simply use MySQL --use account name --p, and then what we did is we gave the new database that we created, so class DB _BAK. So we said this, and then we gave the arrow. So basically, into this new database that we created in the last step, we want data to come from somewhere. We want data to come from the backup that we created. So we did the arrow, and then past that, we then pointed to the backup that we recreated. So /home, /Bob, /uppercase D, rest desktop, / whatever the hell name we called it was, the backup file. And then that pulled all of the SQL into the new database that we created. Then you can log in and you see that the class DB and the class DB _BAK are exact replicas of each other up until this point in time. And so that's how you can have a copy of your database. So again, if you create, like I say, like before, backing up a table, if you're just dealing with the vendors table or the parts table, you may just want to back up a table. But when things start getting more complicated, when you start to have 10 tables, when you start to have multiple things going on, you may just want to back up the entire database, just so not if, when you do something stupid, you don't have to rewrite, 10 tables and all that. Again, though, I would say at the end of the day, you have to be very judicious about when you use these backups and when you type out things manually. I know a lot of new people because I was new way back in the day. So I'm teaching you from experience here. I know sitting there and typing out the same stupid ass SQL statement 1,000 times really seems like a waste of time. And it seems as if it's pointless. But the reality is, again, it's much like the thing of laying bricks. You can intellectually understand how to lay a brick. You put a brick down, you put mortar on top of the brick, and you put another brick on top of that mortar, right? Intellectually, we all understand how to lay bricks. There's a difference between intellectually understanding how to lay bricks and actually laying bricks, right? Same is true with SQL statements, same is true with programming and all the stuff in technology. You can intellectually know, I need to select all from this table where something and it needs to be ordered by, right? You can know that's what's supposed to happen, but if you don't type out things 1,000 times, it's not going to turn into muscle memory. So that is one thing that I would really warn you about with this, is it's very easy to create your set of tables, create your database, create your records the first time, and then be like, oh, thankfully, I don't have to do this anymore. I'm just going to create copies, and then I'm going to replicate the copies and deal with the copies in the future. But by doing that, you actually miss out on gaining the muscle memory of sitting there and creating 1,000 tables and creating 1,000 records and creating databases and just doing it again and again and again, to the point that when some noob sits there and looks at you and goes, well, I don't understand why we use semicolons. You just look at them and go, I don't care. When I use a semicolon, it works. You use something else, it doesn't work. Why do I use semicolons? Because it works. Right? That's the answer. That's the real answer in the technology world. Why do we do X, Y, or Z? Because it works. And I want to go home. I'm not a 20-year-old kid that wants to sit at work for 20 hours. I want to do my job. I want my systems to be up and running. I want my boss to be happy. And then I want to go home. I don't want to argue about semicolons. That's the real world of tech. So anyways, with that, as always, I enjoy doing this class and look forward to seeing you in the next one. Apparently, the type of content you just saw is not what Susan W. wants for the future of YouTube. This means that recommendations by YouTube to this channel have dropped massively and views are becoming comically small. I hate to ask. I used to say I would never ask, but if you could subscribe, like, comment, and most importantly, share the videos that you appreciate, that may help slow the death of this channel. Do remember that if anything at all happens to this channel, you can go to EliTheComputerGuy.com to view the content and access information not available on YouTube.